What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Troybilt trimmer, and the problem is that it's been in storage for a while and now it won't start. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this trimmer. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. This is a very affordable trimmer, and that means a lot of people have them. I've had many of these on this channel, and unfortunately, a lot of them were so damaged that they're now just parts trimmers. Let's hope this one won't join the rest of them. Now, this trimmer came with fuel in the tank, and I'm guessing it was in the tank when they tried to start it. We should probably pour it out and make sure it's not stale or has any water in it. Both would cause it not to start. It's kind of hard to tell, but I don't think there's any oil in this gas. Now, if the engine had started, it would have burned up within 15 or 20 minutes, so it's a good thing that it didn't start. It smells fresh and there's no water in it, so it should have started, so there must be something else wrong. Before we go any further, I want to put some fresh mixed fuel in the tank, just in case we do get it started. Now, before we try and start this trimmer, it was taken apart when it got here, so I'll put the attachment back on. That way there's some load on the engine. If yours doesn't have an attachment, consider borrowing one from a friend. We want to make sure that the trimmer will even start, so let's put some fuel in the carburetor's throat and try starting it. Luckily, it ran for a second, so we'll try and start it following the instructions on the filter cover. If it didn't start, I would then check it for spark with a tester. And if there was spark, I would then use a compression tester to see if the engine was worn out. And unfortunately, the primer bulb isn't filling up, which usually means there's a problem with the carburetor. It looks like we'll need to remove the carb and inspect it for any problems. After removing the top of the primer bulb section, which is also the pump side, we can see that the pea-sized screen is clear of any debris, which is good news. The next thing we need to do is check that the check valve flaps of the pumping diaphragm are flat and parallel with the rest of the diaphragm, which ours is. It's easier to see if you look from the side of the diaphragm. If yours isn't laying flat, either get a carb rebuild kit or a new carburetor. So the next thing we need to check is the metering diaphragm, which is under this metal plate. And unfortunately, it's very stiff and brittle, which is not what it's supposed to be. It should be soft and pliable, so it's the reason why the primer bulb isn't filling with fuel and why the engine won't start. So we're going to have to replace it. Now, when you buy a new diaphragm, make sure that the metal post in the middle is the same height. Before we replace the metering diaphragm, we have to make sure that fuel will pass through the screen and the needle. Fill the screen with some fuel and then press the rocker arm on the opposite side of the carburetor. And unfortunately, it's not flowing through the screen, so we now have to remove the rocker arm assembly and needle and clear the passage. After that, we'll clean the screen with some carburetor cleaner. Now be careful when removing the rocker arm, as there's a tiny spring underneath it. If you lose it, then you might as well buy a new carburetor. Once the passage is clear and the screen has been cleaned, we can now reassemble the rocker arm, the needle, and the screen. After it's back together, we'll put some fuel on the screen again and test it that it passes through. Now if it passes through, we'll then replace the metering diaphragm and put the whole carburetor back together. Another reason why your trimmer might not be starting is that the fuel lines have been destroyed by ethanol gasoline. The lines will either become brittle or soft, depending upon the material the line is made of, and will not allow fuel to get to the carburetor. It's always suggested to use 100% gasoline in your small engines. Now, you might be wondering why I don't replace the primer bulb, and the answer is pretty easy. It's still in great shape, besides its slight color change over time, and we still don't know if the trimmer even works yet. And when we get it working and trimming some grass, then we can change it later on. Before we install both fuel lines, I'll connect the fuel filter line to the bottom port and press the bulb to make sure it works like it's supposed to. It seems to be working fine, so I'll connect the return line, throttle cable, and then replace the air filter base. After that, I'll try starting it, and if needed, we'll adjust the carburetor. So it starts and runs, but it dies while the carburetor is partially choked in position 2. What it means is that it's running out of fuel, and we need to increase the amount at idle to keep it from dying. For this carburetor, you'll need a special tool to turn the adjustment screw. Now, you can buy a kit of several tools from any large online store. The fuel adjustment screw for low engine speeds is near the engine, and to increase the amount of fuel, simply turn the screw counterclockwise in small increments until it doesn't die while idling. I'll start by turning it out a quarter turn, and then I'll see if it still dies. It seems the idle screw has been adjusted out a bit, so I'll turn it in till it idles before I change the fuel adjustment settings. Even after turning the idle screw in a few times, it still won't idle, so I'll then turn the fuel adjustment screw near the engine out another quarter turn and see if it'll idle then. So I turned the same adjustment screw out another quarter turn, and the extra fuel stopped the engine. To deal with this, I'll increase the idle speed just a little bit more. Well, it seems to run a lot better now, but it's best that you let the trimmer cool down and then try a cold start. You may have to adjust it one more time after that. In the future, make sure you run the fuel out of the tank before storing it. So my question is, would you buy a special set of tools to make adjustments you've never made before? Or would you pay someone else to service a non-running trimmer? I know what I would do, but I'm more curious about your answer.
Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.